which looks mysteriously like a park in Southern California. It's your boy, the OG GM, going for another walk, continuing the quest for positivity, or trying, and mumbling our way through on various topics of tabletop role playing, because, somebody might be farming my content. You know who you are. Anyways, we've done monsters, sort of. We've got to revisit monsters more in depth. Perhaps, kind of. We've done doors. We've sort of talked about what a dungeon is. We got to sort of talk about now all the stuff that doesn't make sense. The things that truly make a dungeon a dungeon. Because a dungeon is more than just abandoned mine that some monsters have taken over and has a pit in it, or a dragon or whatever. Dungeons have weird stuff in them. It is just established. Talking statues, magic pools, crashed spaceships, weird Machiavellian riddles for no whatsoever, pirate ships, shout out to the Goonies, portals to other dimensions, elementals, demons, just whatever the ridiculous that is all of White Plume Mountain and Tomb of Horrors. Though both of those have an explanation, but still, just, I don't know why there's a crashed spaceship here. I don't know why there's a pirate ship here. I don't know why these singing statues. And as you get deeper into the cyclopean depths, there's a weird word, cyclopean depths, the weirder the stuff gets. The farther away you get from home, the more likely the dungeon is going to have less stuff that makes sense. Oh, here's a room being guarded by two orcs. That makes sense. To weird shit. Why weird, nightmarish, brain-eating chandeliers. Why? I don't know. Ghost quartet. Why? I don't know. The farther you get from home, the weirder things in the dungeon or the wilderness gets. Now, our good friend, the Basic Expert, has covered the idea of the mythic Underdark before, in depth, got himself in a little trouble over it. Love the Basic Expert, but, he's very opinionated, which is fine, we all are. Tie my shoes. And I've brushed on the idea of the mythic wilderness in the past. So this is not a new topic. If you've spent any time truly digging deep into the corners of the hobby, you will find talks on the mythic underworld, the mythic forest, the mythic dark. There are things in the dark, and sometimes those things don't have to be explained. Now, the idea of the mythic forest, the mythic dark, the farther away you get from home, the weirder things get, the more likely you are to leave the forest of knowledge, the forest of acceptance, and enter the forest of imagination, the forest of possibility. Well, we can go back to Alice in Wonderland, or we can go back even further to the morality plays and Grimm's fairy tales and the folklore of the time. And this is all comes from the idea that don't leave home. The wilderness is dangerous, and the wilderness has things in it we can't explain. Speaking of wilderness, Little Red Riding Hood is a morality play about leaving home and not listening. Jesus loves you. Well, tell Jesus I love him too. Or John Cena, whichever you prefer. I'm sure he's a wonderful guy. Have you accepted John Cena as your Lord and Savior? Have you accepted Hello Kitty as your Lord and Savior? I have. So this is the idea that if the farther away you go from home, the deeper you go into the unknown, the more likely you will stray off the path and step into the land of fairy. Step into the land of the unexplained. Way back when the first idea of these morality plays, these fairy tales, these folklores, these were all just basically warnings about growing up, warnings about leaving home, warnings about the danger that was in the woods, because the woods were dangerous, especially back then. And we still don't know 80% of the stuff that lives on the earth. 90% of the ocean is still unexplored. There's still vast tracts of forest in South America, in Europe, in Russia that, we don't know. Bigfoot. What the fuck? People are still seeing Bigfoot in America. So imagine 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1,000 years ago, where your entire reality is a house and then forest. And you hear noises in the forest you can't explain. So that's where the whole idea comes from. The farther you go into the mythic forest, the farther you get away from home, the farther you get away from known, understandable phenomenon I can explain, the more likely you will fall off the path and encounter the unknown, the fantastic, the things, phenomenon that I cannot explain. Now, you stuff 1,000 years, 2,000 years of literary tradition, fairy tale, folklore, mythology, and general, tall tales, put it in a blender called Dungeons and Dragons, grind it all up, and then spit it out. And that leads us to the idea that the deeper I go into the dungeon, the more weird I can throw stuff off, and the less I have to explain. Right? Because you've left the path, you've left the stuff that makes sense behind, and now you're deep in the Underdark, you're deep in fairy, you're deep in the darkness, and whatever hides in the darkness, you're deep in the unknown. I, as the dungeon designer, can start throwing, whatever wackiness I happen to have floating around in the back of my mind into the dungeon. And unlike the first level or two, where I had to sort of offer an explanation, why are there orcs? Because, the orcs took over the mine. Oh, that's within the limits of Dungeons and Dragons logic, sure. But now I don't have to explain shit. I can throw whatever I want at you, and it's okay, because you went off the path. Oh, look at the little doggos. Don't worry, buddies. I'm not going to hurt your friend. So that's the whole idea of the mythic Underdark, which, again, I highly recommend watching the multiple videos Basic Expert did about it. But this is how we can justify weird stuff in the dungeon, because we don't have to justify it. We only have to offer explanations for the stuff that would logically be in the dungeon. To go back to the lost mines, because, lost gold mines is a good standard thing. The first level or two, the first mile or two of the mine is going to be mine. It's going to be stuff you would find in an abandoned gold mine. Stuff that got left behind, whatever that's moved in to the gold mine after the miners left or got killed, whatever the original reason you're going into the gold mine for, that's all within the justification of the logic of the dungeon. But once you wander off the path, once you decide to go deeper into the unknown, you as the dungeon designer don't have to explain. And the deeper you get into the mythic underworld, the less you have to explain, and the more you can just go buck wild. So, of the core principles of dungeon design or adventure running or storytelling, everything you encounter is the result of phenomenon you understand, the known, or the result of phenomenon you don't understand, the unknown, the mythic, fairy tale. I don't have to explain this because you're 10 levels deep in the dungeon. I don't have to explain this because you've left the path and you've gone into fairy. You've gone into the dark. You've gone into the unknown. And in the unknown, stuff happens. Why is there a statue that talks and asks you riddles? Because you stepped into the unknown. Why is there a wishing well that can turn you into a frog? Because You stepped into the unknown, etc., etc., etc. Every dungeon I can think of off the top of my head, especially the really good ones, have at least one or more encounters with the unknown, with things that you can't explain, with things you don't have to explain. Then, of course, there's White Plume Mountain and Tomb of Horrors, which are filled with things you can't explain unless you dig deeper into the whole mythology behind those two places and the idea that, you know, I was building it because I could. Then sure, yeah, it explains. But still there's that mythic concept to even those ridiculous dungeons. The idea that the unknown took interest and built these places to see what would happen. You know? But Acerysek and Kerperitus, who might be the same person, are big unknowns. We don't have to explain things once Acerysek gets involved. We just have to justify that this is the stuff Acerysek does because he's bored and it's fun for him. And he's trying to prove a point, or just because he can, you know? Ooh, speaking of the unknown. Ooh-wee-oo, ooh-wee-oo. They're cleaning it all up. No, you gotta leave it the way it was. Ooh-wee-oo. So, there's not really much to say about this. But, you know, it's a very simple topic. We could get into hours and hours of theoretical nonsense about, you know, the unknown forest and the idea of myth and folklore and legend and tall tales and morality plays and the moomery arts and waiting for Guffman and all that stuff. But that sounds like more of a master thesis on storytelling than a 20-minute talk about D&D. Is that a D&D figure? Speaking of D&D, it does look like something you'd see on D&D, but I can't be sure. And then there's a duck. And then there's this. This is new. And a turtle. To just, you know, the whole point. Because we're talking about dungeons, and we're talking about, you know, traps, blah, 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 and who built it and why, and what's beyond the last room, right? What happens when they go into the deep? Well, is there a really cool, wacko idea that you have? You know, wishing well, talking statue, ghost dance, go, you know, the party scene in Haunted Mansion, an epic Romeo and Juliet that you want to tell, but through warring factions of Drow. Stuff that you can't explain in, oh, it's an abandoned gold mine. Well, the idea of the mythic Underdark, the mythic forest, is that you can throw those things in and you don't have to explain them. And when you're running in through another dungeon that somebody might have made and you suddenly come across a room or two that seems to go against total logic and have some ridiculous trick in there or a puzzle or an encounter that's just, why is this here? You know, why did you throw them against the avatar of Jubilex? Well, they were in the Underdark. They were in the Underdark. They were in the mythic forest. I don't have to explain what the avatar of Jubilex is doing there. Why is there a talking piano in your game, Elliot 1506? Because there is, and because the rules of the mythic dungeon say I don't have to explain it. The farther you get into the mythic Underdark, the farther you get into the mythic forest, the farther you get into the dark, the farther you get from home, the more likely you will stray off the path. And when you stray off the path, things happen. And those things aren't always explained in ways your brain can comprehend. And the mythic dark, the story does not have to explain it. Now, in reality, all those, you know, folklore tales of what happened when she went off the path, she was taken away by Teferi, you know, or whatever. It was really like more like she was killed by wolves or attacked by bandits. and robbed and killed and left in a ditch, right? But you don't want to say that. That's depressing. If you're going to tell people to be, if you're going to tell your kids, don't go into the dark, don't go into the forest, or bandits will get you. Don't go into the forest, or you might get eaten by a wolf. Well, that's a very realistic fear. That's a really, very realistic threat, especially back then, where these stories all originate from. But it's not very exciting. And it's not a story that will resonate through culture after culture after culture. Little Red Riding Hood resonates, right? We all know a variation of that story. Did you hear Betty Lou Fernango got eaten by a wolf? Yeah, that kind of sucks, but I mean, you know, she went into the woods and there's wolves and she was told not to. Anyways, I've got to bring these cabbages to market. But I'll sure to pass on the story. And then, oh, what happened to Betty Lou Fernango? Oh, she got eaten by the woods. She disappeared in the woods. Fairies. And next thing you know, we have Little Red Riding Hood. All those stories are based upon fact. Something that happened that we couldn't explain, or the explanation was just not interesting. And then that story falls into the hands of storytellers, myth, legend, history, people who need to recount the story over and over and over again, but make it resonate with our already innate fear of the dark. You take away the explanation and you just say things like, "'Cause it's the dark. And in the dark, things happen. And usually those things are awful, which is why I'm telling you, don't get off the path." But as DMs, we know they're going to get off the path. We know they're willingly going to run into the darkness. And whatever weird thing they run into, they will blatantly accept, because that's the rules of Dungeons and Dragons. We accept that there is a swamp monster that lives in the trash compactor in the Death Star, even though that swamp monster should have been killed the very first time they activated the trash compactor and then emptied out the trash. And then somebody went, "Hey, look, there's a swamp monster. I should probably shoot that so you know, it doesn't get into the vents or anything." There's no explanation for the swamp monster to be in the scene in the Death Star, other than it's funny. It builds up tension, and it offers a break, and it hints that there is more going on than you know. Why is this weird one-eyed swamp monster thing in this room in the trash compactor that makes no sense to be here? Because, are you ever going to explain it? Nope. Are we ever going to see it again? Probably not. Does it matter? No. No, I don't have to explain it, because mythic outer space. You do not have to explain that talking statue. You do not have to explain your wishing well. You do not have to explain the fact that there is a log flume ride in your dungeon, because it's the mythic dark. It's the mythic forest. It's the mythic levels. They have left the path. They are far away from home. And the rules of fantasy, the rules of D&D, the rules of the mythic dark, the mythic underdark, the mythic forest say, in closing, the farther you get from home, the farther you get from the known, and the deeper you get into the unknown, the less I have to explain the phenomenon you're encountering. I do not have to explain why the swamp monster is in the Death Star. It just is. We just accept the rules of the story. And then we move on. And if we're never offered an explanation for the talking statue or the wishing well or the ghost course or whatever else, that's okay. Because it's part of the fun, it's part of the story, it's part of the excitement, it's part of the danger, it's a part of understanding that I, as an adventurer, left home. I, as an adventurer, stepped into the dungeon, stepped into the unknown. And doing so, I accept the rules of the unknown. And you, the story, the game master, don't have to explain everything. Let their imagination fill in the gaps. Let them be excited. Let them be afraid. Let them be confused. Let them come back and tell the story to somebody else of what they found in the Underdark. So the next time somebody goes in the Underdark, it's that much more frightening. And they will either learn the lesson, don't leave home, or more likely than not, because we know adventurers are adventurers, we'll ignore the lesson. I know they said not to go in the dungeon. I know they said nobody ever comes back. But, I mean, how do they know they didn't come back? Maybe they just left and went a different direction. You don't know. I won't know until I go there. So I'm going to go. I'm going to accept the responsibility of the rules of the unknown. Again, I highly recommend you check out the much more in-depth explanation of the mythic forest and the mythic Underdark that our good friend Basic Expert made. I will post a link somewhere. If you appreciate these walk and talks, let me know. Please consider supporting the OGGM through either the Ko-Fi link or by checking out what my game on sale for the month on drive-thru, or just letting me know that you appreciate the mumblings of a madman as I walk around this mythical town and try and bubble through the multiple years of this hobby to offer you, hopefully, relatively simple guides to adventure building. Maybe I succeed, maybe I fail. I don't know. I'm having fun. Hopefully you are too. Till next time, I'm the OGGM, and I'll talk to you later. Have a great day. Stay safe.